Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to today's CFD Professional Development conversation on how fashion can build community and commerce in the metaverse. I'm Sasha Brown, the Director of Professional Development at the CFDA, and it's been my pleasure to have worked with our partners, the Sandbox, Polygon Studios, and 5Crypto to present this conversation to you all today. I want to welcome you all to submit questions via the Q&A feature throughout the hour, and we'll hold about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the hour to answer any questions that come our way. So it's a pleasure to introduce our moderator today. Her name is Megan McDowell, and she is the Senior Innovation Editor at Vogue Business, where she leads its coverage of technology and innovation. She's the author of the weekly Technology Edit newsletter and the voice of the Tech Edit podcast. She is known for identifying the key drivers of the future of fashion and retail and offering digestible insights on which technologies matter. She's become a leading expert on fashion's role and opportunity in the metaverse. So thank you so much, Megan, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. Okay, so let's get started. As you all know, fashion plays an outsized role in the metaverse, and largely because of its ability to help people with their self-expression and their identity in these virtual worlds. So this provides a unique opportunity for brands to provide clothing, beauty products, and sometimes even like full bodies via avatars. So it's a big opportunity, but a big risk, and you have to make sure you get it right. There's also existing communities in virtual worlds who are very accustomed to paying for digital fashion. For example, on Roblox alone, I think 1 in 5 daily active users update their avatars on any given day. And this is even without special powers. This is literally just for their identity and for self-expression. So this is a great opportunity for fashion. And that is what I want to talk about today: commerce and community in the metaverse, and how brands can tap into this. So joining us are Symone Berry, who's the co-founder of People of Crypto and the Chief Strategist and Innovation Director of 5Crypto. Rebekah Minkoff, the founder of the eponymous fashion brand, Rebekah Minkoff. Mathieu Nouzareth, who is the CEO of the Sandbox US, and I'm going to be calling him Matthew for this conversation just for ease. And Brian Trenzo, the Metaverse lead of Polygon Studios. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks. So quickly, I want to run through, I think in 2 sentences, I would love to hear from each of you how you describe your role and what our audience should know about your work. So I don't know, Symone, I'll start with you.
So really happy to be here, excited to talk about this. People of Crypto is dedicated to advancing representation, diversity, and culture within Web3. And at 5C, we bridge culture, crypto, and integrate brands into Web3. So our real focus is to ensure that you're authentically entering and understand what Web3 means.
Rebekah, I'm sure everyone's familiar with your brand, but tell us a little bit about you specifically, if you want to nod to your metaverse projects of late.
Yeah, of course. We decided to enter the metaverse September of 2021, first female American designer, to really gain a new customer base and explore what we could do with fashion in this space that's so quickly growing and becoming filled with women who, again, as you said, want to express themselves no matter where they are. So that's what we're here to do.
Very cool. Matthew?
Hi, I'm the US CEO for the Sandbox, and the Sandbox is the largest Web3 metaverse today. And we are very active with fashion brands. Actually, fashion is probably one of the most active vertical in the metaverse today.
And Brian?
Hi there, Brian Trenzo, Metaverse lead at Polygon Studios. Polygon Studios is the advisory arm of Polygon vis-a-vis blockchain-based games, open decentralized metaverse, NFTs more generally. And in my capacity as Metaverse lead, I work with large IP holders, particularly fashion, seeing that that's where I come from, that vertical, having owned and operated a store and a fashion label here in America. And I got into crypto through the lens of fashion back in 2017, having done trend consulting work for WGSN, speaking on the evolution of cosmetics and in-game wearables vis-a-vis blockchain.
Very cool. Amazing roles. Thank you all for being here. I am excited to learn from you today. Symone, let's start with you. This idea of community, we're seeing the idea of customers That word kind of isn't being used anymore. We're starting to turn more toward community. How can brands think about this concept, and are communities that exist already, are they even kind of open to brands entering the chat, so to speak?
So I love this question. I think that the first thing is to recognize that the key difference is the goals, growth, success metrics that are in Web 2 aren't necessarily the same in Web 3. So in Web 3, you start with a clear purpose, you grow the community around that purpose, you match your growth strategies and community incentives with them, and then you figure out the go-to-market motions. Versus, here's the customer you're selling to. Community means you're collaborating with and building with. There's a purposeful alignment. So to me, brands need to be asking themselves the question, what value are you adding to this community? How are you fostering this relationship beyond product? And I think that community mindset is really the shift versus just commerce. You're not just selling product, you're selling brand. You're incorporating your ethos within a community that is also building with you. And that to me is the most powerful part about Web3. And we're so early in that brands don't need to be limited by what they're currently working on.
Interesting. So like even the metrics, when gauging early success could be the power, like the happiness of the community. Is that what you're saying? Or like how many are in it, or just
general consumer sentiment, how they're looking at it, how you're entering. A lot of it is test and learn, and recognizing that entering the space humbly is part of it. I recognize that large brands kind of like, no, it needs to be this, and what are my KPIs? But that's actually kind of challenging when you're dealing with an entirely different permissionless, governless, autonomy society where you're not being able to lock into every little data point, where you're really just understanding how your brand relates to community outside of this larger kind of goal of revenue, which is obviously very important, but how you're approaching this community becomes so much different.
Interesting. Rebekah, how are you thinking about this idea of audience versus customer versus community? And are you, when your projects launch, are you trying to speak to primarily the existing collectors and Web3 community, or are you trying to bring your existing customers into this new world? Or I guess, how are you approaching that?
So, each time we've done this, we've learned different things. Our first foray into it, I would say 98% of the people that purchased the NFTs from us were not from my existing channels, community.
Oh, cool.
We were shocked. And when we came back again and did it again, it was very similar metrics. These are people that have known about crypto, they're excited about it, they're collectors. I think with our next drop, which is a more, I guess, commercial, if I might use that word in this context, our drop with Mavion, where we're going to have 55 NFTs, and then in September, 3,000. I'm hoping my consumer embraces that. I think she's still learning, and it's a number of times we message it to her. And because this isn't the only thing we do, we message it to her consistently, but it's several times a year. So I think she's coming along. But the goal now, we have an entirely new community that we're building, and people that are excited about these NFTs and offering them perks and insights and stuff that even my customer doesn't get. So I think that we're excited to have new people around.
That's an amazing stat. That's so cool. Well done. Matthew, tell me a little bit about this idea of gaming and games, because even before we used the word metaverse and Web3 or NFTs, games were already a focus for fashion brands, and we're starting to see them enter gaming spaces. There's a lot of similarities with metaverse worlds. There's narrative, there's immersive virtual experiences, but we're starting to see games kind of evolve to be metaverse platforms. The Sandbox's name is literally kind of the idea of play. Help us understand, is it a gaming platform, or can you play games? Or I guess, what should fashion brands know about this?
So yes, the Sandbox is originally it's a game. We're coming from a gaming background. We've been a game studio for more than 10 years now, and we've built the Sandbox really as a game. And you have challenges, quests, leaderboard. You can level up, all sorts of regular game mechanics. But as time goes by, we realize that we understand that the metaverse can be more than gaming, and even so. You can have gamified experiences that are not truly games, but you can always, inject some kind of gaming, experiences, no matter what. But as time goes by, we are expanding outside of gaming. So right now, we're doing entertainment, we're doing art, we're doing fashion. Fashion is actually one of the most active vertical in the Sandbox, we are signing more and more deals with luxury and fashion brands around the world.
That's cool. I was going to ask you, when you say fashion is fashion is more active in the platform, does that mean they're literally coming to you and buying real estate, or like, what does that mean to be active in the space?
Yes, that is, the Sandbox is a land-based virtual real estate metaverse. So you have to buy land. You can buy a small piece of land, which is seen from an avatar's perspective is around 2.5 acres. And we have a finite amount of land, around 166,000 plots. And right now, fashion brands are, flocking to buy lands in the Sandbox because of the nature of this finite nature of land. We've sold 2/3 of it already. But I think the reason fashion brands are coming to the Sandbox and to the metaverse in general is that they, like in the real world, people are really, they put a lot of emphasis on using fashion to show who they are to their community. It's all about building, your own community inside the Sandbox or inside the other metaverse. And it turns out that people, they are interested in, like in the real world, they want to buy sneakers, they want to buy, hats or handbags or T-shirts, for example, to show who they are to their community. So the fashion brands are very active. Another reason I think why fashion brands are very active is I think traditionally fashion companies are very good at really maybe identifying new trends with consumers and maybe before other companies. And that's the reason why I think they're entering the metaverse and the Sandbox in particular today.
Interesting. Yeah, I know the Sandbox is one of the potential really important partners that you hear mentioned a lot these days. So is Polygon. So Brian, tell us, you mentioned briefly that you come from sort of like a fashion background already. Now you're at Polygon Studios. And when I hear of Polygon, I usually think, oh, that's a blockchain, or like often you'll hear a project, oh, that's released on Polygon. Help us understand what that means and why is fashion important to you? Like why is a key part of your job working with fashion brands?
Yeah, so to speak on Polygon first, the best way to view us, we are a blockchain. We exist to scale the Ethereum virtual machine. Most everyone knows Ethereum is a slow and clunky technology because it is highly decentralized and secure, and we exist to make it faster. That's the most reductive way of explaining Polygon. And the importance of Polygon for fashion brands, in my mind, is understanding that which is being built upon Polygon. So for instance, we have an integration with Sandbox, whereby most, if not close to all, and Matthew, you can check me on that, NFTs are being minted on Polygon now because it is expensive and clunky to do on Ethereum. So it's more inexpensive to do on Polygon. Therefore, NFTs, wearables, cosmetics in-game are built on Polygon. It's important to our ecosystem, to the composability of it. And to speak on that a little bit further, I like to zoom out and talk about how Web 1 and Web 2 were accessed and how Web 3 will be accessed and is being accessed right now through the metaverse. Web 1 being before social media, we accessed that with our mouse. We clicked on browsers. That's how we gained access to the internet. Web 2, currently, we have our thumbs and our screens. We know how to touch screens, and that's how we access Web 2 social media, especially. And Web 3, we're going to, and we are currently accessing it through avatars. It's an immersive 3D social media, essentially, that is gamified. The definition of games is being more elasticized over time. And if you follow that thesis, if you believe in that thesis at all, the importance of self-expression and identity and property rights, actually owning that which is on your avatar, is very clear. And that was how I started my sort of journey through Web3 back in 2017, talking to brands about the importance of property rights and the importance of the emerging avatar economy through these virtual worlds like Sandbox.
Interesting. I love that the way you described it as exploring it instead of through your phone, through your own avatar. I think that's really interesting. And I think having tech partners like you all to help guide brands on this stuff is super important. Rebekah, I'd love to ask you, do you have, and this is kind of like a question that I ask everyone because people give different answers. Do you have a Web3 team, or are you kind of incorporating it just throughout the business? And how do you kind of know when to partner with an external tech partner versus build something in-house?
Yeah, so I wanted to touch on that and also budget, because you see these huge companies coming in and they have a lot of money. And I think for designers, this can seem daunting and impossible. So when I say this, it's myself. It is the head of my brand partnerships and PR as the lead. And then we lean on, my creative team when it comes to the look and feel. Like all the garments were designed in-house, but then we passed off all of those sketches to the team at Dematerialized. And they worked with a company called Digital Rags, who then brought everything to life. So we lean on our partners wherever we can. For the Mavion collaboration, we ideated together, and then, their artist is going to go draw it. But it doesn't have to be an expensive proposition. We entered the metaverse, with under $15,000. I'm just being real for those of you tuning in. And we made way more money than that. So I think if you're smart about who you choose as your partners, and you lean on the resources that those partners have, you can enter the metaverse, and it doesn't have to be something that you're taking a huge risk, but spending a lot of money and not certain where you end up with that. But we are internally we're too lean of a team, especially because, again, our main focus is our handbag and apparel and shoe business. And so it's my goal that we would expand the team in next year as we continue this.
Super cool. Thank you for sharing those stats. I think it's so rare for people to share that. And it's really helpful to see that it doesn't have to necessarily be expensive to experiment in the space. And Brian, I know you work with brands a lot to help them kind of navigate this. And one thing you've said before is that brands sometimes see different blockchains like content distribution platforms, but you said there actually are more longer term technical considerations when you commit to certain partners. What does that mean? Because I know some new tech startups might supplement a brand's project, and that might be an incentive, or they might try to think, oh, we can test one partner and then switch halfway through our strategy. But what should we know about that? You're still on mute.
It wouldn't be a panel if someone wasn't on mute. It had to be me. I was saying that I think the most important term here is composability, which is a difficult term. It's dense, but the best way of understanding it is through a term that I'm trying to meme into existence, and that's culture language. The idea that anything that's built on a blockchain is open and permissionless, and you can build upon it. So if I have a brand that wants to reward Rebekah's holders, people who hold her Genesis NFTs, I can build smart contracts that talk to her smart contracts and actually reward that. Now, the composability of Polygon is attached to Ethereum, which is the leading technology, the most decentralized and the most secure of the blockchains. And again, we exist to scale that technology. So if one wants composability within this large, secure, and decentralized ecosystem, one would either build on Ethereum or a technology that is built upon Ethereum, like Polygon. So oftentimes I'll speak to brands and ask them if they have a sandbox strategy, or if they may deploy a sandbox strategy at some point in time. And the answer is usually yes. So Matthew, you would love to know that because Sandbox is awesome and they want to be there. But if you want to be in the sandbox, you need Ethereum virtual machine composability. You need to be built on Polygon or Ethereum to exist there. That's a very reductive way of drilling down on that, but I think it paints a picture of the importance of a long-term vision of where you want to be, where you want your products to sort of communicate with other smart contracts built on the blockchain.
Interesting. Fascinating. So what I heard you say is that Polygon works with Sandbox on the assets and on the land. So if there's a Sandbox asset for fashion, it's probably built on Polygon, or I don't know, is that what you meant?
Yes, in a sense. And Matthew can double click on that, but I believe, Matthew, that all of the land is built on Ethereum, and the original NFTs were built on Ethereum, but now NFTs are built on Polygon because it's more inexpensive.
Yeah, we are migrating to Polygon right now, and as Brian said, it's more expensive. It's cheaper to build on Polygon, but also another added benefit is is way better for the environment. And it's something that people often mention when talking about NFTs and the metaverse. So it's good for everybody.
Rebecca, I saw you had your hand raised. Did you want to weigh in on
That
that?
was a mistake.
Okay, great. Symone, I want to talk to you because I realized that you actually did a recent project in the beauty space on Sandbox, and it was a really interesting approach to appealing to a community and self-expression. So tell us a little bit about this project.
So it's the first time a beauty brand has entered Sandbox, and what was really interesting about it. So at People of Crypto, we're very purpose driven. We're able to align with brands on very different touch points. One of our things is to be able to bridge Web 2 with Web 3 and allowing consumers that kind of pathway to feel the metaverse in a way that feels very valid to them. I think even through this conversation, I'm sure your viewers are hearing a lot of words that they may be like, what's happening right now? Like, I don't understand. So part of our whole purpose is to educate and onboard, create diverse IP and storytelling that really bridges both communities, because we think that it's really necessary to have both engaged. So with Nix, we were mission aligned. We were able to tie, and mission aligned, honestly, even in a larger aspect where Sandbox has dedicated and really put the resources behind ensuring that diversity and inclusion is at the forefront of what they're creating with their platform. So on all levels, we are mission aligned with our Pride launch. So we were able to support the communities that POC is focused on, which is Black and Brown women, LGBTQAI+, also something that Nix is focused on, and translating that mission into our avatar collection through really unique voxel reimagined looks. So part of the mission was makeup has no gender. We use non-binary avatars. We really tried to focus on self-identity through customization, which Sandbox then aligned with us. So we were able to customize pronouns and sexual identity. In our social game in the area, the players were really introduced to Nix in a very natural way. It wasn't something that was pushed on, it was just something that was shared with. And I think when we're looking at this as a use case, it doesn't always need to just be such literal translations, which I do think that brands have this idea, well, I sell this, so I must sell this here. The idea of experimentation, creativity, allowing you kind of this playfulness to enter is what's so important. And when you have a platform like Sandbox and like a Polygon that are really trying to drive this idea of UGC, which is user created content, and drive creativity forward, that mission alignment becomes really simple. And that's what we're really looking for with brands and how you appeal to community. The community that came in on Web3 believes in increasing diversity and inclusion. They want LGBTQAI projects to have more visibility, Black and Brown women to have more visibility. Their community that's aligned with their brand also aligned in the same thing. So that is like a great example of where it's not about, at no point did we really discuss product. It's about that mission. And to me, again, that's where Web3 really differs, not just from the technical side, but from the human side of Web2.
Mm-hmm. So the two things right there, you mentioned the word voxels, and it goes back to those words. So just so everyone knows, and tell me if I'm wrong, but voxels are sort of like pixels, but they're more three-dimensional. And that's the term you use for the stuff that you design three-dimensional virtual stuff with, right? Is that correct?
I don't know if Matthew wants to answer this to get more specific, but voxel, yes.
No, Voxel, this is our style of the Sandbox. You have different styles of different metaverse, and some metaverse are what you call high definition. They're trying to mimic reality in very high, all the details, whereas us, we took the opposite approach, and we have this level of abstraction and the world and the avatar and the world in which in which you are is shown as a bit pixelated or voxelated. If you have kids or if you have played Minecraft or Roblox, this looks a bit like this.
Got it.
To give you an idea.
And so, thank you. It's so interesting. Symone, so did you even create digital makeup at all? You mentioned that product wasn't a big part of the conversation. So did that get introduced in the project?
So it did. It was reimagined. So they had initial makeup looks that they were launching for Pride that tied back to the progressive flag. So we did the same version. We created makeup looks that kind of played into it. And those makeup looks became traits. So when you're creating a generative project, it's very similar. So everything has a trait: your eye, your nose, your lips, the lipstick that goes on it, something that happens on it. So the makeup became 8 specific traits, and those traits could move through whichever avatar. So we have no control of it. So it really fed into makeup has no gender. And the makeup, I think that a lot of people, how do you translate makeup in voxels? What's really amazing about imagination is that when you see it, you understand it. So as soon as you say makeup, you're like, oh, that's dope. Where you actually have like a level of imaginative moments and that playful moment of engaging with. And what's great about Sandbox is that voxel technology is really easy for everyone to approach. And I think when we're looking at these avatars, and to Rebekah's point, those high definition 3D real me, that's not really easy for every creator to get involved in, where a voxel edit, much easier to engage with. I mean, I come from a fashion design background. If I can do it, anybody can do it, because from a technical standpoint, not really my skill set, but from a visual and design, I can lean into that. And I love the fact that it's not just what it needs to be. It's a representation of what this virtual world could be.
Interesting. And I love that how it's not necessarily bound by the laws of physics. So when you think of makeup, you can, or fashion or anything, you can think beyond literal how we define them in our terms these days. I think that's really interesting. Matthew, I'd love to ask you, I know we've seen like Gucci and Adidas and these big brands with these big budgets buy big real estate in the Sandbox and start to develop it. Super cool. Is it necessary for a brand to buy real estate to participate in the Sandbox, and or could one create wearables that people buy and wear in the Sandbox? And how does that work?
Yeah, you can just create wearables, and as Symone was explaining, this is very easy to do because we have tools that anyone can do, and those tools they are meant to tap into a very vast pool of talent, not just engineers. So we've decided to have a no-code approach. You can't even code if you want to, and the tools are super easy, and you can create wearables. Can be sneakers, t-shirt, hats, bags, anything you want, and sell them in our marketplace. And our marketplace, our take rate is very low. We're taking 5%, and we give back 95% to the creators. And if you want to go further, yes, you can buy a plot of land and then create an experience, as we call them, and you create a logic. It's a bit more time consuming, but it's still not that difficult, and it's very affordable. You can buy a plot of land for, as I said, 2.5 acres for maybe a few $1,000s. And then you can build on top of this. You can have a store, you can have trees, you can have cars, roads, I mean, whatever you want. And it's not very expensive and not very difficult.
Interesting. That's great to hear. Rebekah, I'd love to hear from you in your journey. You've mentioned you've done a number of different NFT projects and by now, and the space moves so quickly that a year and a half ago, the trends that we were seeing were different than a year ago, and now we're seeing a different trend. So can you talk to us about kind of what you've learned, how your strategy has evolved, and any other insights through this journey?
Yeah, I think that I don't want to sound like a broken record, but giving the community value, another word for it is utility, is really, really important. We have collectors of the first 2 drops, and there's a marketplace being built for the dematerialized. But we were able to say, okay, great, come behind the scenes with me and my creative director. We're going to take you on the journey, how we got here. So they got to see, from concept to sketch to, how the video was created that we did, which is still on our site if anyone's curious. And now going behind the scenes to my casting for my presentation, or going up to the garment center to see a garment being made. Things that money can't buy, I think, are really important to include. And I think that we're offering digital items as well. So with some of the NFTs we're going to be launching, you get a one-of-a-kind bag. with the drop we're doing in September, we're going to make 3,000 bags that will never exist anywhere else. So each holder will get a bag as well. So I think it's what can you add value to make not only the NFT more exciting, but resaleable, because, you know, some people are in the game to collect, some people are in the game to resell it. And so how do you give this a longevity that your community keeps wanting to come back for more, buying, reselling, keeping, and then again, how do you continue to build the community and make them feel special and excited? And, you know, they're taking a real chance. This is just the beginning. Only 500,000 people have ever purchased NFTs. If you think about it, you know, billions more have yet to do this. So they're taking a chance in this new space. So how do you reward them for that? So that's what we're looking at with each one of our drops.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned this idea of digital projects, and I know that's a word that people have a lot of opinions on, but it kind of, as I understand it, refers to like a physical and a digital twin, or some sort of digital perk that comes with a physical item. What's your philosophy there? Are you thinking that one day everything's going to have a digital twin, or some sort of digital equivalent? And are you thinking maybe it's a different design, or do you think it should be exactly replicated? Or I guess how are you thinking about the digital concept?
I mean, I think if it can be replicated, great. Our last collection was NFT collection was nothing that you could make in the real world. So that obviously couldn't be replicated. But I think there's value, you know, even if you take RFID identification technology and how that can be now put on the blockchain. And now you can verify that you bought a Rebecca Minkoff or Chanel or a Louis Vuitton, and you have the NFT that goes with it. You have the proof that the bag is legitimate. It's registered there. No one can fake that. I think there's just value in things having an existence. You know, I own this bag, so now therefore in the metaverse, here are all the different places I can take it to. Here's my right, you know, if it's a piece of art, to be able to make that art and sell it on my site. And I think the rights and uses of these things can extend when you have the digital and the physical. And I think there's power in that I think people can unlock.
Fascinating. Brian, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. If Polygon can help brands do that. And also something even just kind of more simply, which probably isn't simple at all, is this idea of accepting cryptocurrencies for transactions. We've seen brands including Balenciaga, Farfetch, and Gucci start accepting cryptocurrency. What is your advice there as well?
On the digital side, it's very interesting. You know, I like to take a step back and talk about like what a digital item is today or prior to blockchain and what it has become. And that's to say that digital items used to be a license to use something. You didn't actually own it, right? And the issuer of the item was on a centralized ledger and could issue it ad infinitum. You had no sort of transparency to how many were made. And you could only use the item in closed environments, meaning you couldn't transport that into another environment. It's as though if I was wearing this Jacques Mus shirt at a Rick Owens store and Jacques Mus came and ripped it off me and said, you violated the terms of service. Like that. That's the ridiculousness of the digital world we lived in. Now, through ownership, one can actually own these items. And what we can do is represent those items physically as well. So through some of the technologies that Rebecca was leaning into and that you had brought up, RFID being one of them, there are brands and decentralized applications working on these technologies that link the physical to the digital, whereby the digital can be leveled up based off of physical actions. So I can wear this shirt to a concert, scan it at the concert, and then the digital representation of it can actually morph and transform. And for anyone with young kids or for anyone who spends any time playing video games themselves, I probably spend more time than any middle-aged man should admit playing video games. One knows that the cachet, sort of like that clout, which is why PFPs became so important to show what you actually own, is so important in those virtual worlds. And one can actually start to connect the dots between the digital and the physical. And the last note that I'll make on this topic in sort of like projecting out what sort of explosion of creativity I think we will have when it comes to digital goods. And please, someone correct me if I'm wrong on this statistic. It's been a while since I checked it, but in 2014, there were more photos taken on Instagram than in the history of the world before, right? That was when Instagram really hockey sticked. That's a crazy statistic. And I'm of the belief that we will reach a point in time in the not so distant future where there will be more digital items, particularly clothing, that will be made for the metaverse than the history of clothing before it. I think we will see a very similar trajectory. So I just gave you a lot of words. I don't know if I answered your question directly, but that's how I felt on the topic of digital.
Yeah, no, I think it's super interesting in that prediction, because if you think about it, to produce something in the digital sense doesn't require literally the waste that does in the physical world. So you can test items and replicate them for less money. I guess gas fees, though, are kind of interesting in that whole conversation. But I did also ask you about cryptocurrency. Should brands accept cryptocurrency, or is it too much too soon? What are your thoughts there?
So this is not an official Polygon stance. This is my stance. There's so much regulatory uncertainty associated with cryptocurrencies. I would recommend that if one wanted to accept cryptocurrencies, that they retain counsel to actually figure that out. I think it's a great way to future-proof yourself. I do think that we are pacing towards a world where cryptocurrencies will be accepted by all major vendors. I think stable coins, which is an entirely separate subject, which has its own regulatory issues associated therewith, will be the way that we transact, because it's pegged one-to-one to the US dollar. There's no fluctuation. You're not, paying in an asset that can go up in value, which people wouldn't want to do. We all know that Bitcoin pizza story, or many people know that Bitcoin pizza story. Someone bought a pizza 10 years ago that is now worth, millions upon maybe even billions of dollars. So to answer your question, get legal counsel and understand how it future-proofs yourself.
Okay, got it. So Matthew, what is the future of shopping in the metaverse? What does that look like? Can you shop in the sandbox? Do you need cryptocurrency? Can it tie to a digital twin? What are we looking at here? I know that's a lot of questions.
Yeah, currently, I mean, we don't have like a connection to a backend. So for example, if you were to buy a digital handbags, you can't right now get like a physical twin and get it shipped to you, but hopefully this will be coming later. But you could use the NFT, and if the store will be able to read the NFT, and you could redeem it against something, whatever that is. What I find interesting in terms of shopping with the metaverse is really to go beyond what you can do in the physical space, or even what you can do on mobile or on the web. The way you shop on mobile on the web is very transactional. You just have a list of items and you put them in your bag, and then you click buy, and then they're being shipped. And on the other hand, you have the physical stores, which can be a bit more experiential, but also are limited by space, by size, and also cost. And I think the metaverse opens up a new way for brands to show their users and their clients a new way to shop, which is much more experiential, which is not limited by physical constraints. And you can have it's just your only limit is your creativity. So I think a lot of brands will start by replicating their shop in the metaverse. It's like you enter and you have a rack and you have product on the shelves, and that's fine. This is how they will learn how to do it. But eventually, I think they will become much more creative and tap into the vast potential of the metaverse.
Well, I love that idea. I mean, I just love the idea of, even if it does look like a shop, maybe it looks like a shop from 100 years ago, like, could you time travel back to the original store? I just think that's so exciting to think about where you could take it.
Yeah, you can time travel, but also you can travel, you can open a door and all of a sudden you're on a photo shoot in the Bahamas, and then you open the next door and you're in a workshop in the Paris with the creator, or the possibilities are really endless. And again, your only limit or your imagination, your creativity.
Yeah, I'm so excited to see how that plays out. And I think everyone, make sure you submit your questions, because we're about to get into our Q&A portion. So I just want to remind our audience to submit your question in the chat box. But I want to take it back now to kind of where we began, with the idea of community, collaboration, inclusion. Symone, what would your advice be for brands developing a project? Where should they start? And do you think eventually it will just be the norm for brands to sort of collaborate with the creators who are in the space?
So I loved what everybody has been saying. I think that Brian tapped on something with the photos. I missed the stat, but I think that we need to recognize that it's already $1 billion industry. So when you look at our other brands, let's just use Fortnite, they did 2 billion in skins, which is basically digital wearables. What we're talking about, though, is something very unique in the fact that as a purchaser, as a brand, you're allowing your consumer to have ownership. And I think that's where the collaborative portion of it comes from, and also educating and onboarding your consumers on the vast differences. So first, I think that test and learn is really important. A level of humility in entering the space, recognizing that we are very early stages, but the necessity to participate is so important to be able to shape and engage the development of this technology. You have like a lot of developers creating blockchain using a lot of words that make no sense to any of us. And our POV is extremely necessary in shaping how this technology is made, especially so we don't repeat mistakes of the past. You're looking at a space that's 81% male. Fashion, I have to say, from probably a development, maybe not the gentleman on this stage, but overall may not be the key focus of what they're trying to create. So having our industry engaged at these early stages, saying that this is what we would need to scale, to be able to convert, to bring Web 2 consumers in is extremely important. And since in Web 2, we had our great awakening, let's just say, with many corporations making very large D&I commitments, we need to ensure that we're expanding that into Web 3. We cannot build this technology following the same mistakes we've made in the past. Black and brown women, people of color, LGBTQAI+, have an unprecedented cultural influence and spending power. 84.3% of our global population are people of color. The metaverse is a global movement. So recognizing that culture drives commerce, we must, as the builders, ensure that we have authentic representation and that we're creating equitable, profitable, and a scalable Web3 for all.
Absolutely. I love that. Creativity and community to drive commerce. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that, everyone. We're actually getting a number of different questions in now, so I'm going to turn it back over to Sasha, who's going to help facilitate our Q&A portion.
Great. Thank you, Megan. So our first question is for Rebekah and Brian, but feel free, anyone on the panel, to contribute. So looking 3 years out, what percentage of brand to consumer revenue for fashion brands do you think will come from Web3 related revenue, NFTs, digital wearables, etc.?
I mean, it's so hard to predict. You know, Forever 21 did a 50-cent hoodie that they've made $1.5 million on, I think was a quote from on the panel Megan and I were on last week. So man, that'd be great. I don't know if I want to sell anything for 50 cents in the metaverse, but it just goes to show you the power of that. So I think we see it definitely being a growing part of our business, but I have no way to predict where this is going to go. I can only hope that if it's 10% of my business, that will be great. But hell, it could be 40%. Who knows?
I'm going to try.
Another pandemic, it'll be 50%.
I think Rebekah's right. You can't actually answer it, but I would like to sort of like put myself in an investment banker's interview of just like trying to get to the answer and who cares what the answer actually is. And I looked to Citibank's guidance. They said that the metaverse in their mind will be a $8 to $10 trillion opportunity in 10 years, right? So a third of that is roughly $2 to $3 trillion. The global economy is roughly 100 trillion. So one would say on average 2 to 3% of your business in 3 years. But I think Rebekah makes a good point that there will be people blazing the path. The way we saw in Web 2, where people built brands using omni-channel and social media tools, where they had 100% of their brand on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram, you will see that, right? You will see metaverse endemic brands using Web3 tools to sell 100% of their sell-through through Web3. So that was my little exercise for the day, I guess.
I can add to this that, and I can't give you the name, but we already have partners generating tens of millions of dollars of revenues inside the Sandbox. So it's starting to be meaningful.
Fashion companies?
I can't say more.
You gotta tell us if it's fashion, otherwise it's not relevant.
It could be, it's more, right now it's more entertainment, but fashion is coming very soon. And I think they will easily generate that, in the next few months.
I mean, I can see from our launch project that if we had done like a fashion drop, we probably would not have been so revenue heavy in the initial drop versus the fact that we did it digitally, which we went far beyond what we would have done in the physical world. Sorry, I'm muted. I was like giving a whole thing and I'm like, eh. So from our initial drop, if we had dropped a fashion line versus how we created our first avatar drop, I can honestly, based on my experience in both worlds, say that this was far more lucrative in the way that we have now entered the community and created even a larger community outside of just Web 2. So from a KPI perspective, I understand where the question is coming from, but I also think that's where you have to step back and recognize this is growth.
Perfect. So Parsons is one school that is introducing the first thesis digital fashion course in the BFA fashion design program fall 2022. Could you share any priorities or practical knowledge skills other than 3D that design students should be acquiring or building for this new industry?
So outside of Flow, I'm assuming what they should be understanding and learning. I do think that they should understand the basis of blockchain technology and what that means to build and create upon. I think that they should also be engaging in, like, for instance, Sandbox has a really unique game makers fun tool where you're able to create on your own without needing coding. The educational system for fashion, I have to say, and this is my personal opinion, is way beyond or behind what it should be. So the fact that most schools are just now learning Flow and moving through it, I mean, some of them are just learned Illustrator to create tech backs on. So being able to kind of fast forward that communication and recognizing what marketplaces, especially blockchain marketplaces, apply to fashion businesses is going to become extremely important. So understanding that blockchain layers and what that means to build upon and doing the research. So it would be great if schools were also partnering, for instance, with a Sandbox or with a Polygon, so that they could also provide them the tools and the development tools, because both places have those in foundational place.
Perfect. Anyone else?
I think trying to get, there's a whole opportunity for designers. Again, digital designers are so in need, especially if you're not able to build a team in-house, and being able to design for a Sandbox versus, the high pixels, we did for our drops, very different skill sets. But I think focusing on interoperability, it's a word that people are constantly trying to figure out. Well, I bought something here and I can't take it anywhere else. And having brains come out of these schools that can understand all the different metaverses, all the opportunities, and where the overlaps are not, and how you can build connections to that, because that'll be very valuable. You can take your bag anywhere in the physical world. It should be the same way in the metaverse, and it's very far behind today. And so getting students to learn that could be great.
It'd be great if they could learn coding in high school, like earlier, because that requires a coding background. Would also be great if they could create simpler ways to code, like that simpler language.
Well, Rebecca and Symone, this next question is for both of you. Again, how likely will fashion brands adopt digital verification for physical goods in the metaverse?
Digital verification for goods in the metaverse?
So authentication of quality or brand, they're already doing it. So that's already something that's happening. And I do think that blockchain in its larger self, like, this isn't the most sexiest part, but being able to track supply chain, being able to track authenticity, these are really the true core power. The PFPs and the digital fashion, that's the sexy stuff that we talk about, but the transaction is really where the power is going to be through the long run. I believe that Louis Vuitton, Chanel, all the larger houses, I believe probably, I don't know if Rebekah, she can speak to if she's already kind of instituted that power to be able to track.
With our RM Green line, which is our sustainable line made in partnership with Resonance, everything we make can be traced on the blockchain with those goods. But they built it that way from the beginning, you know, going back to a factory that makes whatever. It's really hard to go back to some of these older factories that are just like, we just want to make handbags. Can you just leave us alone?
Rebekah, this one's for you again. Congratulations on a great Web3 strategy and success. I'm the creative director of Miami Fashion Week, and we just launched our strategy, and it's definitely all about creating your community in the space. You said that most of your sales weren't from your current clientele. Can you share with us a little bit more of how you created your community?
So our first drop was literally test and learn. We really relied heavily on the dematerialized, and we had a strategy to promote it, to talk about it. It sold out in 9 minutes. We didn't even message it. So it was really the community that the dematerialized had cultivated that was excited about this drop. And they've done, you know, drops with Karl Lagerfeld, Alexander McQueen, and a bunch of designers that are just digital first designers that don't even have physical goods. For the second one, I felt like, again, we gotta get to know these people who bought this stuff. So that's when the relationship became, you know, leading up to our second drop. How do we engage them? How do we talk to them? How do we get access? And that's where we had a lot of our private events for these people. They got physical gifts. They got, you know, tickets to the next show. So I think it's building on it. And again, we're very much as a brand present on Instagram, but it's now, okay, good. We should probably focus on Twitter. Do we open up a Discord, which we haven't done yet? That is where they're living. And it's just, there's not enough hours in the day for me to get to it all, but I know that they appreciate that I'm talking to them when I can. We're engaging them when we can, and saying, we hear you, we see you, we're going to keep partnering, you know, with you. And, you know, here's access to everything we have. The minute we have it, we tell you first. And so I think they appreciate that.
I want to just continue with you, Rebekah, and ask, how do you think that pop-ups and exclusive events will transition or merge into the metaverse?
I mean, I think you already see it happening, whether it's exclusive concerts and events and gatherings in the metaverse. If you're the NFT owner, you get access. I think what's very interesting, which some companies are doing now, is if you own a World of Women, you get the first access to buy the Mavion. And so now you're targeting these other communities, which you can do with being able to see who owns what on the blockchain, to then invite them in to experience yours. And so I feel like, you know, scarcity sells, yet you need to have scale. And so there are ways to do that where you're already a member of this exclusive club, you can come be a part of ours. And I think the brands that can tap into that are very smart and can keep building a community that way faster.
Maybe I'll ask Symone to kick off this response to this question. How can you leverage specific cryptocurrencies to promote community within our commerce? Currency that benefits women of color, the LGBTQ community?
So by currency, I'm assuming they're saying crypto. So I think that I'm trying to figure out how to say this. So a token, let's say a token. So POC has a token, it's an NFT. An NFT is a token, which in theory is not part of the financial portion, but does have a representation of some sort of financial gain. Currency in itself, I don't know that that could be used to create, like you could use it to create a DAO, which would allow people to invest in, but again, that becomes a token. I would say that if you want to be supporting these communities, you should support teams that are actually diverse and are creating create projects or support projects with your fiat or your cryptocurrency that are pushing forward this idea of diversity and inclusion. If you are a creator, that you are creating projects that also participate and move the conversation forward. I think that diversity of thought is also extremely important. It's not just, so if you're investing in currencies, what do these currencies represent? Everyone has a white paper. What do they really stand for? What are they really creating? I can speak to Sandbox because we obviously just did a partnership. They actually spoke to it. They opened the Sandbox for a week before their Alpha 3, which is not till July, something they've never done before, to have a belonging week, to really signal to all communities that we stand by this. So when you're looking at the currencies you want to invest into, you should be looking at what, like any company, what are they really doing for the ecosystem past just increasing my bottom line? I hope that answered it.
Thank you, Symone. So I think we have time for one more question. I'm hoping that everyone can contribute their thoughts to it. And it actually leads in really nicely to our next conversation we're having about the metaverse with our partners, which will be specifically focused on emerging designers. So NFTs are a great space for known brands and influencers due to their built-in following, but how would you suggest unknown designers or maybe emerging designers be most successful in this space?
I could take that first. I would actually jump in and disagree. I feel as though the 1,000 true fans theory, which has become popular through creator tools like Patreon and OnlyFans, for instance, whereby one can monetize his or her personal brand with 1,000 true fans that are willing to pay $100 a year to get a premium level of content, has only been amplified through Web3 tools, whereby one, because it's permissionless and because it's still early days and because the surface area is quite large, one can launch a digital brand today, some of which are PFP projects that Symone and Rebekah have made reference to. World of Women. World of Women was not a big brand, came presumably out of nowhere, and created its own rich IP and is developing a Web3 native brand. Now, one can say that's not a fashion brand, that's not applicable to what we're talking about here. But I think that the lessons that you learn from World of Women can be applied to digital wearables, can be applied to any sort of culture that you're looking to build on Web3 tools, specifically within the metaverse, even more specifically wearables. So I would disagree with that.
I also think smaller brands have way more flexibility. So when you're looking at the idea of expressing play or sense of play innovation, obviously there's some technical limitations or maybe it's cost prohibitive, but this next generation of consumer really wants to take part of a creative experience. Smaller brands are able to flexibly kind of test and learn and work within these parameters. As Brian said, it's not just about who you are, it's what you're creating and who you're creating with, who you're speaking to. So if there's that flexibility to kind of take a grassroots approach, which I think smaller brands actually can, and they're engaging in a much natural or a more authentic way versus just, I'm pushing my brand out here, because that's one of the things. It can't look like you're buying space. It's the first thing that everyone turns against. So smaller brands do have the ability to collaborate with Web3 brands. And really, I hope that anyone listening immediately just starts to educate themselves and understand, because the technology that we're talking about, the whole point of it is to disrupt gatekeeping, disrupt the power, allow equality across. So the fact that we're talking about big brands, this also applies to small brands. It is permissionless. If you have a community, you can now bring them into Web3, or you can engage with a Web3 community and bring them into your brand. And that is the true beauty of Web3 to me.
Beautiful. Thank you, Symone. Well, if that's all the feedback we have, I want to really thank you all for joining us today. Brian, Rebekah, Symone, Matthew, and Megan for so beautifully leading this conversation for us. Please stay tuned. There's going to be so much more from our partners and content and professional development for you all to join this year. And we hope you stay tuned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.